Hi, everyone, and welcome to our June speaker event with UXPA. UXPA Boston supports and connects UX students and professionals in the design, research, IA, content, CX, and related fields. Membership is free, so if you're interested in events like this, we encourage you to join. Our website is uxpaboston.org, and we offer monthly events with expert speakers, annual conference, mentorship, and educational opportunities too. Tonight's event is Building Better UI in Figma with Jennifer Smith. And in this session, you'll learn how to build a UI in Figma and convert it into a reusable design system easily. And we'll also be recording tonight's event and making it available later too if you're not able to stay for the whole session. And then if you're looking for upcoming events, next weekend on Saturday, June 24th, we have a companion event for tonight's talk, which is going to be more of a in-depth workshop that will be in person at the Humana office in the Boston Seaport. And then coming in July, we're going to be having a speaker session about conversational design and using ChatGPT. And later in the summer too, in August, we'll be running another in-person workshop about leveraging strategic research frameworks. And that will also be hosted at Humana in the Seaport. And one thing we like to do at the start of all of our events is leave it open for anyone who's looking to hire anyone for a role or anyone looking for a role. If that's either one of you, we encourage you to put your information in the chat. If you have any links for postings or profiles, feel free to put it there. If you have any roles you're looking to fill, we also invite you to check out our website and support and submit job listings that you can add there or for our Slack group too. And then for tonight's speaker, we have Jennifer Smith, co-founder of American Graphics. And she's had the opportunity to work closely with UX and visual design teams from hundreds of organizations and helps agencies and internal teams discover how to build information and visual designs to create successful experiences. And you can look in the chat too. We also have a link for assets to go along with tonight's talk. Thank you again, and I'm going to pass it over to Jen.
Excellent. Had to unmute myself. Great. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. I am going to get as much information in as I can in the short time we have, like an hour and a half. I'm going to share my screen, though, to start. And I just want to go over a couple slides myself. So let's hope you can see these okay. But I am going to talk about building better UI in Figma. Just again, my background, worked as a designer. I'm not going to go through all these, but got a lot of UX experience working with Microsoft over the years. I was an MVP and artist in residence. And funny thing is, pandemic came and I decided to go back to school. And so I'm actually in Bentley's Human Factors Master's program with 3 classes to go. So I waited way too long, but I'll finally get there. So the agenda is going to be an overview of Figma. I'm going to try to give it a little bit more than the basics, but I also want to try to answer questions that people always have as I'm building UI. And so I'm going to be working in Figma Live, and I'll be explaining things like the difference between groups versus frames, talking about the mindset. And if you've ever heard me speak before or other people about Figma, you've probably discovered it is a mindset. It really is. It's how you have to look at your artwork. You don't create things the same way that you would with a product like Adobe Illustrator. You actually have to put a little thought into the structure of what you're creating. Kind of think like a developer more. I'll talk about building a shareable prototype. And then as I'm going along, I'll be talking about parts that can be created to be part of your design system. And I'll try to talk about best practices along the way, naming all the other things that you have to be concerned with. If you have questions that are relevant to what I am speaking about at that moment, you can throw that in chat and I might see it. I'm hoping that I can. Otherwise, I will answer questions at the end. I'll try to do the best I can to make sure that we fit all these questions that you might have, because I know that sometimes it just stops you from working. I did include a link to a Dropbox folder. And if you don't see it, maybe put that in chat, and perhaps Nick, you can copy that and paste it again if they're not seeing that. But it's in case you want to follow along or use the same files later. And yes, this is being recorded, so you can actually maybe do it on your own later. So first thing I want to say is don't start in Figma. I work with a lot of people who jump right into Figma. It's just like a tool to complete your project. You shouldn't actually start it in it. Start with a sketch or a wireframe, and you'll see why when I start building things. And it's because you want to plan for repeated elements. You want to plan for styles or things that you're going to reuse again. You don't want to build an entire UI and then find out that you actually want to round the corners of each one of your boxes and have to go back and manually change each box to have a rounded corner. And that's the sort of thing that can happen if you just start working and you don't plan out what the project is actually going to look like. So know your branding colors, your type styles, as much information as you possibly can. This is just an example from balsamic wireframes, but again, it gives me a better idea of what I'm building before I start getting in the weeds. If you haven't heard of Brad Frost, Atomic Design, Google him. This is part of that thinking about starting with an atom and then going to the molecule and organisms, and then templates and pages. And so you'll see that as I build things, I'm going to start with a component and then maybe make that a component with another component and then make them part of another component. Like things are carried through using these elements, so that if I quickly want to change the text, I can, or I can change the icon, or if I'm using this as an instance on 20 different screens, I can update one really easily, but it's again, a different way of thinking. So plugins that you might see me use today, I'll talk about them when I'm going through. I just thought it might help if you visually see them. Excuse me, Component Plus, Find Component, Lorem Ipsum, Zeppelin, Detached Component, and you can find these just by going to the Figma menu to plugins, down to find more plugins. And I'm going to be using the Figma professional version. So if you have the free version, you will not see team libraries. You might see everything else is pretty much the same, but you don't have the ability to share libraries in a team. And some of you might have the organizational copy. I do not have that. So, that includes additional options as well. So that is it. I'm going to go ahead and just go right into.
Actually, Jennifer, before you do
Yes.
that, the link you shared is more InDesign and Excel files.
Oops, hold on a minute. Thank you for that. Let me go ahead and grab this. So forget that. Sorry, guys. If you want to learn Excel, there you go. Let me create a new transfer. And okay, Figma session. This should take a second. And this will be a lot more fun. Excel's no fun. Okay, so I'm going to post that right now and then get started. Thanks for letting me know early on so that if anybody needs these files, they can get it. All right. Copy link. And all right, guys, try that one and let Nick know, because I'll be talking if that is not correct. Okay, so I'm going to go back to Figma and I'm just going to get started. This is the first thing I want to mention. This file, even though it looks like just typical UI, is totally built incorrectly. It's built the way that somebody might build something in Illustrator, where they create a text box and then they create a rectangle and then maybe they group the two together And, here's an icon with the text and then another shape. If you understand how Figma is supposed to work, you should understand that everything starts with the basic element and then is built from that. And so what I'm going to do is talk about a couple things with Figma, and then I'm actually going to recreate this in a way that will hopefully make sense to you. So obviously, a couple things I just want to cover real quickly, just brief overview of what you're looking at. Figma is vector, right? So everything here can be edited. You can drop things in from Illustrator. In fact, I'll create something really quickly here. I'm going up to the top and you'll see that you have your menus up here. I can either press F for frame or A for artboard to get a frame in Figma. And I'll be using a lot of keyboard shortcuts here. And in fact, if you want to refer back to some of the keyboard shortcuts I'm working with, they have a kind of a weird interface down here. But if you click on the question mark down in the bottom, you'll see that you can bring up all the keyboard shortcuts and they're organized across the bottom so that you can kind of find things that you're looking for. I'm going to go ahead and close that for right now. And I'm going to press F. And you can see that my properties or design panel comes up and I can say, I'm going to create an iPhone 14 artboard. So I've got this in here. I'm going over to the properties panel and I'm clicking on fill. Now you'll notice that I think the affordance in here is not necessarily great. I'm trying to change the fill. You'll see that there's a tiny little white square there that's hard to see, but I'm going to click on it and I'm going to go ahead and just apply a color. And maybe I want to do black for this. I'm also going to press T to put text in. So I press the letter T. This is my first artboard. And I'm going to go ahead and select the text. And just like if you were using Illustrator or anything else, you can use the same keyboard shortcuts, Control Shift lesser than or greater than, or Command Shift lesser than or greater than. And I also have properties over here, such as centering. I can center the entire object. So you're seeing a lot of similarities to your product, Adobe Illustrator, if that's what you're typically designing within. It's just going to be the way that we're actually creating the parts within here. Now, let me just take this a little bit further. I'm going to go ahead and press O for oval. And again, this is just a quick review so that we can go over the interface a little bit here. You'll notice that as I'm adding objects here, they're appearing on the layers panel. And in the layers panel, it's actually indicating as I add things, stacking things up on top of each other, including the information that I'm putting here. Like for instance, I just put an ellipse in. Now taking this a little bit further, I've got my ellipse here. I want to color it. You'll see that if I go over to fill, I can of course choose a color. In fact, I don't even have to be in there. If I press the letter I can sample any color from the screen. But if I come into the fill, you'll see that I can choose solid or linear or radial or angular or diamond. These are all gradients, and I can even include image. And again, looks a little bit odd, but I can click on choose image, and then I can just add my image here. So again, working very similar to some of the other products that you might use, we're going to just take this a little bit further. If I come in here and I press R, I can put a rectangle in. And you'll notice that Figma does not have a selection tool and a direct selection tool. And that's because if you ever want to use the direct selection tool, you can just double click and it highlights the shape so that you can go in and edit the points if you like. In fact, you even have a pen tool. If you want to go in, I'm going to press escape. If I want to go in and create things just like I would in Illustrator, I can of course do that right in here as well, using the exact same keyboard shortcuts that I can use when I'm using the vector tools in Illustrator. One other thing before I move on, let's say that I want to make my own icon. You even have the ability, to create compound shapes using, let's see, let me go ahead and copy this guy. I'm just doing Control C and Control V. So I have 2 of those, and then I'm going to make another oval. Pull this down. All right, there's my snowman to start. I'm going to select both of these, and you'll notice that I can go up to the top and I can say subtract selection. Let me go ahead and make sure this is behind. So you're seeing I'm doing a lot of the same things that I might be doing in Illustrator, just to show you how much you can actually do directly in this tool. Okay, so I can pull that down, and then I'm going to make a rectangle and go across, and I'll select both of these, and then I'll just say subtract the selection. So again, just showing you how you can build things. All right, so let's get back to this though. Let's maybe build something as it should be built inside Figma. And in fact, like I said, I'll recreate something like this. So let me get rid of this and get rid of this. I'm going to press F for my frame. I'm going to go ahead and just choose an iPhone 14. That's fine. We'll go replicate it in here. I'm going to go to the properties and I'm going to apply a fill, or if I'm too lazy to go click on those buttons, I'm just going to press I and say, I just want it to be black. Okay, here's where it starts to get a little different. I want to create one of these buttons to begin with. So I'm going to go ahead and press T, and I'm going to type name. All right, and instead of creating a rectangle and then grouping the item, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press Shift A. And what happens is you'll notice that a frame is created. And I'm going to discuss the difference between a frame and grouping in a short bit, but you'll see that with a frame, I have a whole bunch of other opportunities. You'll notice that in my properties panel, it now says auto layout. And it also indicates that my layout is moving horizontally and that I have a little bit of padding here. I'm going to go ahead and change this so I can set up the width. I can even grab this and set up. All right, you know what? Let me do this. Let me try to just explain where I'm going a little bit better and slow down. There is an issue with the Figma UI in that they use gray, which is kind of difficult to see, but I will do my best to go slowly and move, keep it connected. I'll move this a little bit closer so you can see. So going back to what I did, I'll just do this again real quickly. I'm just going to type button. And then instead of making a rectangle and going ahead and grouping it, I'm making sure this is aligned left. So I just check the property panel over here to the right. You can see that I have a whole text section. And then I'm pressing Shift A. And this is the start of that thinking of atom and molecules, because as soon as I do Shift A, watch what happens. Here's the word button. And as soon as I press Shift A, now, let me make sure I press it, Shift A. Now you'll see that the word button is inside a frame. So this is starting that whole process. Here's the atom, here's the molecule, and now the frame can have properties applied to it. So like, for instance, I could go into the fill and I can say, all right, I want you to have a white fill. That's fine. And my text, I'm going to go ahead and select. Let me go back and I'll select my text. My text, I actually want that to have a black fill. And I can then play with the properties of that frame, and I can come up to the design panel and I can say, go ahead and round the corners. I can change where it's sitting within this button. You can see that I can say the layout I want in the center or the left. In this case, I'm going to keep it on the left. I can change the padding that I want in it. But all of this started with the word button instead of me doing 2 different parts. And of course, if you're familiar with working with groups, there's no relationship between the frame or the group and what is actually happening inside. So if I come in here and I press rectangle and I make a rectangle and I send it to the back and I group these two items, I'm going to get a very different effect. You'll see that the group now appears over in the layers panel, and I can open this up and I can select each one of these objects, but I'm not getting that relationship. I'm not getting those layout controls that I have with this, where I can just constantly change this. The other thing that you'll see that's really helpful is that I can even set this up, this there, and let me make sure that I have this set up to, okay, hug contents. Let me create a new one real quickly just so that you can see. Button. Okay, I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go ahead and give that fill a color. So we're going to go ahead and make it red or something. But you'll notice that, again, I can say this is centered within this button. And look how it responds to size as well. This is my button. So you're not going to get that same effect from a group. And the reason why that's working is because if I select this frame, you'll see that over to in the design panel, you'll see it says frame, it says the X and Y coordinates, but it also says something that says hug and hug, so that if I add items, it's actually going to hug the contents. Yet I can still go down to the auto layout and say, hug the contents, but give me, 21. I actually always use even amounts here, 22 pixels of space between it. So hopefully that makes sense. The difference between creating something with a group and creating something with a frame. And I'm just showing you something called auto layout right now, which is extremely popular, but it can also confuse you. So if you've ever opened up somebody else's artwork and you go in and you make a change, you might get an unexpected response just because you aren't quite sure why this is, the button, why it's maybe collapsing and resizing. And that's due to the properties within the frame. And you can, of course, change that. You can say, no, I want that to be fixed width all the time. Don't grow bigger, don't grow smaller, whatever makes it better for you. Now I'm going to go back to this original button that I created. I'm going to get rid of these. And you'll notice again, I feel like, as somebody who does human factors, this UI does drive me crazy because it's very light. It looks like it's almost inactive. And you'll see that if I want to add a stroke as a crossover, it becomes dark. And you'll see something that, a plus sign, and then I can click and choose that I want a stroke that is white. And then, of course, I have all the properties here, just like you're used to from Illustrator or whatever product that you're typically using. I can even, this is kind of cool, I can even say I only want a stroke on the right or a stroke on the bottom. I'm going to go back to all again. And then you'll see these ellipses where you can go in and you can set up miter and, stroke style and all sorts of other things like this. So you'll see, again, this all started with the text. Now, I want to cover some things as I go along here. The other reason you want to think about things as you create them is because obviously I'm going to reuse this in this one design like 4 times total. And if I go back and I just option drag this, which I can do, and I can even press Control D or Command D, that's great. I can build my UI. But then if somebody comes back to me and says the text is too large or the stroke is too thick, then I'm really stuck and I have to do a bunch of manual work. So I'm going to start off right away showing you the right way to work within Figma. So I've got this here, a couple things that I can do, starting again with just even the most minor thing. I might go into the text and say, great, I'm using something called inter, regular, it's 32. And again, I always try to stick with even numbers so that I don't pixel split. I have it centered, I get everything set up. And so maybe I want to save this as a style. And you're probably used to seeing character or paragraph styles, which this is very similar to. If I look at text though, again, kind of hidden UI, but you'll see 4 dots to the right of the word text and it says style. And so if I want to save this text style so that I can quickly go back and make edits later or update the characteristics, I can do that. So I'm going to click on that and you'll see again, difficult to see it at first, but a plus sign. And so when I click on that, I can call this button text. Now, here's the thing. In many cases, you might want to stick with names that make sense to not only you or maybe development. And so you might call something H1 or H2 or H3. In this case, this is just going to be button text. But if I want to inform somebody that this is the button text for my standard forms or whatever, I can even help find these a little bit better by just organizing by name. So like, for instance, I can type forms / button text. And I'll show you what this looks like later, but that gives me a little bit of a category so that I can more easily find this style later. And I'm just going to say, go ahead and create that. Now I'll create another style just so that you can see. Let me undo that. I'll put some text up here. Form, I'll just type form, and maybe this one is going to be a little bit bigger. All right. And maybe I want to save this style as well. So I go over to text and I click on the 4 dots and I say plus, and this time I'll type form. Again, I got to make sure I spell it the right way. Title. And then I want to put the / in there. Okay, so create a style. All right, so now anytime I want to access that text, and I want to make sure. Yes, I called one forms and one form. Let me go back and fix that. It's easy to do. I'm going to just go back into here, this guy. So this is good that you see this. I'm going to go and edit this. And I am going to call it forms title. Let me go ahead and add that S. Wow, you can tell I just got back from vacation. I can't even spell anything right. Okay, there we go. All right, so I really messed this up. What you want to do is make sure that you name it exactly the same. I'm going to have to delete it and then come back in and get this, which is kind of dumb. But you'll see that by typing in a name and then doing a / you can actually create categories. And instead of deleting that, I'm just going to move on because I don't have a lot of time. But with anything that you create in Figma, if you name it in a way, like if we go into strokes or fills and we include a word and we consistently use that word and put a / and then another word, you'll create categories within so that you can find your styles more easily. So let me continue this. Let me go ahead and I'll do a stroke style. You'll see these 4 dots exist on pretty much all the elements within Figma. So I can come in and say, you know what? I'm using this 2-point inside white stroke on a whole bunch of things. Let me create this as a style. So I click on the style. I'm going to go ahead, click on the plus sign, and I'll call it 1-point white. And then create the style. And now anytime I want to use that, I can go back and I can go into the stroke and I can click on the plus sign. And then I can choose that style as well. So let me make sure I get this. There we go. All right. So 1-point white. There it is. Okay. So moving on, this whole entire object might want to be saved so that I can just pull it out and reuse it over and over again. And that's where components come into place. Now, if I'm going to use a bunch of components or reusable items, I want to make sure that I have a place to put them. I don't want to leave them on my actual design. So I'm going to go over, and you saw over to the left, you see layers. Those are all the shapes and things that I'm working with right now. Those are all the elements that are on the page. You'll also see something that's called assets. At this point, I don't really have any assets in this file. I have not created any components or reusable items. You'll also see something that says page 1. If you're organizing a file, you can put certain layouts on different pages, but in many cases, people will organize a file to keep their components separate from the rest of the file. And the reason for that is that you don't want your live components right within your design file, because if you make a change to them, then you might accidentally update a whole bunch of other elements within your page. So I'm going to go into the page 1, and I'm going to say, I want a new page, and I'm going to call it components. And I'm going to go back to page 1, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to go ahead and say, all right, this whole element, I know I saved a style for the text, I saved a style for the stroke, but I also want this entire element to be used over and over again. So I go up to the top and I can say create component. And when I choose create component, hello, there it was. Okay, you'll see it changes over on the left. You'll see that now there are 4 diamonds. So that indicates that that item is a component. I can press Control R for rename or double click on it. I'm going to call it text input. But if I was organizing things, I could even put the slash in here. So I could put form text input to create a category that way as well. So I'm going to go ahead and put this. There we go. All right. I don't want to leave it here. This is one of the first plugins that I just want to make you aware of. If you want to keep an instance of a component on the page, but yet save the component someplace where it's safe and secure, you can create a component. And then if you right click, you'll see that I'm going down to my plugins and I'm going to use something that's called Component Plus. Component Plus simply keeps an instance there. You'll notice that my 4 diamonds will change into a hollow diamond, indicating that it's now just an instance. So I can do that, and it puts the component someplace else on the page. Now, once it's here, it's no longer in my design, but it's still not exactly where I want it. So if I right click on it again, I can choose move to page. Please put this on my components page. If you ever right click on an object and you don't see move to page, it's probably because you don't have the page created just yet. That's why I created that first. And now I'm going to say move to page. And now that is living on the components page. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit so you can see it, but it's living on this page. I'm pressing Shift 2 to view this at actual size, but you'll see it's living here. And now anytime I want to access it, I can go back to my design. I can do this. I can just take the existing one. This is now an instance and just Option or Alt drag it, or I can go to assets and you'll see that it's living in the assets folder, and then I can drag and drop it out anytime I need it. It's just called local components. It's within this one file, but now I have something that I can reuse over and over again. And in fact, if I do decide that, maybe the text is a little bit large, or I want to change the color of the stroke, all I have to do is go ahead and right click on an instance and go back to the main component. And then of course I can take this text and I can shrink it down or whatever I want to do with this. I'm going to bring it down in size. Okay. And if I, was using a style for this, I could even come in here and you'll see that I can click on the edit style and I can do this to reflect it throughout every instance of using that button text. I just did it for this one component, but I'm going to go back to page 1. So let me go back to layers, page 1, and you'll see that because it's a component, the size was reflected within all the buttons. So again, this is the reason that you want to build this way in Figma. This is why you want to think about your design ahead of time. Even if you don't know what your font's going to look like, choose anything because you can change it later. Even if you don't know how wide the box is going to be or how thick the stroke is going to be, just build the elements because you can always go back and you can fix them really quickly and easily. So let's take this and organize this a little bit better. I'm going to go to the components page and I'm simply going to create a frame. So I'm pressing F and I'm just going to make my own frame and I'm going to call it forms. And now I'm going to go ahead and put the text input inside of here. And what you'll notice is that now when I go to assets, now I can go to forms and I can turn this down and any components or objects that I saved within that artboard are now going to have a category in which they can follow. So let me go back to layers, page 1, and let's continue building a little bit more. Maybe I want to, here, I'm going to go ahead and put another text box in here. I notice I'm just making it a mess. I just put these all over the place. But this is the magic of the auto layout. I can select all 4 of these. I can press Shift A and automatically it does align and distribute. Basically, I can change the space between the objects and I can put in an exact amount. If I want over here, I can say, oh, I want 18 between. And the other nice thing is that if I decide that I want to add another one, I can just select one and clone. And you'll see I'm just cloning it and it's just adding it to this. Or if I decide I don't want that, I can just delete it. So thinking of the way that Brad Frost was thinking of the atom and the molecule and then moving on from there, you could even take something like this and even make this a component so that you always have the entire form to use. And I'm going to go ahead and use component plus on this. It's going to create a copy and I'm going to say, can you move this to the components page? Like get it off of here. And now I just have an instance down here. Okay, so taking this a little bit further, I'm going to pull this over so you can see a little bit better. We're going to create maybe this button with an icon. So I want to put icons in here. So I can place images a number of ways. You saw I can fill with an image. That's almost the easiest way is whenever you're placing an image is to create a shape and just fill. That way you're controlling the size and such. But when you're doing icons, you'll probably just want to go in and place an image. And so I have some icons in here. I'm going to go ahead and grab all of them just so I have them. And I'm going to open them. And then up at the top, it's going to say place all or discard all, or I can click one at a time. I'm just going to say place all. Let me make sure. Well, that's certainly weird. Okay, it's there, but let me place them again. I think I had an artboard selected, but I will just do this real quickly. Gonna open these, place all. There they are. Okay. And if I have the artwork named correctly, coming out of Illustrator or wherever it's coming from, then automatically the frames, you'll see it's called dark mode or directions bus. You'll see that these all came in as frames and that it's supporting the vector. And if I wanted to, I could even dig down further and change the color of things, all vector. But I know that I'm going to be using these a whole bunch, these icons. So instead of just using them as one-off icons, I'm just going to immediately make them components. And so maybe I'll even just lift them up. I'm going to cut them. Well, actually, I'll make them a component first, but you'll notice there's an arrow up here. Like if I create a component right now by clicking on this, it's going to create one big component of all these icons. But if I click on the arrow, I can say, can you create multiple components? And since they're all named correctly, it's going to make it easy for me to find these icons later. So I'm going to say, go ahead and create multiple components. And now they're all separate components. You can see, named, folder, directions, bus. And now since they're all selected, I can just right click and I can say, can you move to the page called components? And now if I go back to the components page, here they are. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select all of them. Let me deselect that frame. Come on. Boom. All right. And I'm going to drag those a little bit further away. And I'll go ahead and I can either use a frame or a section. Doesn't matter. They both work the same here, but I'll create a section just to show you something different. And I'll call this icons. And now if I go back to my page one and I decide that I want to use one of these icons, you'll see that I can go to assets and now it says icons. And now if I drag out an icon, I can start to work. And this is a component, which makes it really easy for me to do a couple things here. I'm going to zoom in. And let me come over here just to make it easier to see. I'll move this form over and I'll move this closer to the properties, zoom in a little bit more. And I'm going to go ahead and put some type in. Type. And I'm just going to use some generic text. I'm going to make sure it's aligned left because I want to create a button where the icon is next to the text. So I have both of these. I'm going to select both of them. And Figma is really smart. When you press Shift A to apply that auto layout, it looks at it and says, oh, this is a horizontal layout. So I'm going to go ahead, Shift A, and keep it horizontal. So you can see, but I could switch it if I want it. Of course, then if I'm switching it to this, I'd want to change this to the center. You can see how you can kind of play with these. But also it's automatically leaving my space between the same that I had, but I can drag this down and say, oh, I actually only want 2 pixels between this. And I do have a frame. So the frame allows me to go ahead and create a color. So I'll just say, yeah, I want to go ahead and put this inside of maybe an orange box. And I want to go ahead and put a little padding here and a little padding here. And maybe I want to round the corners. So go ahead and do that. So I've taken this and this has all been started, from my, my button text. Yes, I can move it back and forth if I want, just by dragging it or pressing the arrow key. I'm going to go ahead and call this icon button. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as a component. So I'll go up, I'll say, create this as a component. I haven't used it yet, so I can just move it to the components page. And now if I want to use it, I can do one of a couple things. So let me go back to my page, click on this, Shift 2. All right. And all right, I want to use that button in here. So you can see it's in my assets panel, but I can also press Shift I anytime. And without having to go to the assets panel, you'll see that I can also find my assets there as well. It's up at the top. And if you start getting a huge amount of assets, you can even type in the search and then come up with anything that's relevant. So I just typed icon in to see anything that had icon in the name, but I found it and I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop it out. All right. So again, reusable items, responsive items. I come in here and I change the text and the button grows or shrinks, or, if I don't want it to, I can fix it. But giving me the opportunity to build things that I can reuse over and over again. If you're working in Figma correctly, the first, maybe few projects that you're working on, you're creating brand new components. But as you start working more, you are actually dragging and dropping elements that you've already created. You don't want to keep creating one-off items. You want to think ahead and create items that you're going to reuse over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and back out a little bit. And I can see that maybe I'll bring this. Whoops, I did not mean to do that. I'll make this a little bit bigger, but I'm going to make it bigger by going to the main component. So you can see, I can just go to main component and I'll make that a little bit bigger here. Make the text a little bit bigger. Make the icon a little bit bigger. And now when I go back to page 1, let me go ahead and put this in the forms page. Go back to page 1 or return to instance. You'll see now it looks a little bigger. Okay, so when I initially put this together, I made all the icons components. And again, the reason you do something like that is because you're thinking of how you might make changes in the future. So if I come in here and I drill into this icon and I just double clicked on it within the instance, you'll see it saying, oh, you're using the account picture. But I can say, no, I want this to say dark mode. Oh no, I want this to be a folder. And I want to change this text to find file or whatever. But you can constantly change these so that, again, you create one design, but you can use it multiple times, multiple instances. Now, again, something outside of Figma, if you plan on using icons that you're going to reuse and swap, make sure that they're all the same size. And so if you've ever created a pattern in Illustrator, you know that sometimes you have to put a bounding box around the objects. And in my case, I always make a 24 pixel by 24 pixel box. And then I force the icon to fit inside of there so that, you know, it might not be perfect, but you don't want to have an icon that when you swap squishes in one case or stretches in another. And that leads me to the next type of layout that you might be concerned with. So you don't always use auto layout. I mean, auto layout, you'll recognize, again, if you open somebody else's file, you'll recognize auto layout because it's going to have, go ahead and select one of these. It is going to have these are all components, so I'm not seeing it. So I'm going to go back to the component page, but auto layouts will give you the 3 lines. And yeah, these are already components. So let me just go back and I'll quickly just create something so that you can see the difference between auto layout and a regular frame. So here, in fact, I'll go ahead and I'll place 3 icons in here. I'll go to my assets and I'll say, I want this icon, and this icon. And I'll zoom in. Watch what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to put my type down and I'll say profile. I'll make this a little bit smaller. I'll make sure it's centered. Yep, it's centered. And I'll just clone this. In fact, you know what? I don't even need these right now. I'm going to just take these 2 and I'm going to select both of them. I don't even have to center them because the auto layout will do that. But if I shift A, okay, now it's centered. It automatically, you can see, it automatically knew that was going down. But I'm going to go ahead and clone this 3 times, maybe in 4, just so you can see this. It's not even, but now I did the auto layout stacking it. And now I'm going to do Shift A, and now they're evenly going across. And in this one, I'll switch this to dark mode, dark. And then on this one, I'll switch this to bus. But notice the interaction with the other parts in here because I'm using taxi. There we go. So, so I've got two auto layouts here, one with just this object and then going across so that I can easily create a menu, whatever I'm trying to create here. But this is how auto layout works. You can actually apply multiple fills. I just did that by accident, but I'm going to go ahead and add a little margin here. Like maybe this is a nav bar at the bottom or whatever. Okay, so let me explain the difference between what I just did here and a regular frame, because you don't always want to apply auto layout. Like for instance, if I come in here and I place an icon, so I'll go ahead and put an icon in, and I'll put some text. Favorite. Watch the difference between a regular frame and this auto layout. I'll select both of these, and instead of pressing Shift A, I'm just going to right click, and you'll see that Add Auto Layout is within your menu here, but I'm just going to say Frame Selection, and the keyboard shortcut is Control-Alt-G because it's very similar to grouping, but it gives you some additional items. So if I take this and just create a frame around here, you'll see, all right, that pound sign, that means it's a frame. It looks like a group. It's got these two objects in it, but I can have some interactivity within here. And again, if you've ever had to dissect or open up other people's documents, you might see some of the stuff. But when I click on the star within there, it says, okay, I'm pinned to the upper left corner, which means that if I now use this someplace else, you'll see like they're both pinned there and it's not reacting to me. But if I take the favorite, I can say, can you be pinned to the upper right? And now when I select the frame, you'll see that now it reacts like this. So there are times when you might create something where you just simply want a frame and that you don't want all that automatic spacing to occur. You don't want it to be a, automatically aligned and distributed. You just want to essentially group things together, but you still want to constrain them. And these constraints pop up a lot when you go and you start editing existing files, especially like you might even find, and this might be the case with some of the files that you've worked with, where you go to stretch something and all the icons start getting distorted or the pictures start getting distorted. And a lot of times that's because if you were to drill down and double click on these items, like if I come in here, okay, it is constrained to the upper left, left, right, center scale. Trying to purposely destroy this, but you'll see that in some cases that these items have been set to scale. And so you might go ahead and move something and then you get this sort of effect instead of that fixed look that you might be looking for. So again, it's all logical. It all makes sense, especially if you look at the layers panel, but this is an auto layout and this is just a regular frame. And if we talked about grouping, they don't give you all those extra properties. You don't have the ability to go in and play with those constraints and, align something so that it's forced to stay in the upper left-hand corner or whatever. So, but you can see these are just standard groups in this case. All right, so let me go back. I was going in to create something similar to this. It's not exactly there, but I think you're getting an idea. But even something as simple as, an object like a back arrow with the text, even something like that should be thought of as one unit. Even something like up here, the items here. So like, for instance, if I were to come in here, let me go ahead and insert an icon. And I think I have maybe I don't. I thought I had a back icon here. I think I might in here. Yeah, we'll just take this. Okay, so I size this. And by the way, I'm using all SVGs because they're scalable. I put my text in, create an account. I make that a little bit bigger, and maybe it's going to be a line left. But even something simple like this, I can use auto layout for, or I could even use frames for. So if you're framing something, you'll have to go in and make sure that you align it, distribute it, because it's just going to basically keep it with the spacing that you've already determined. But if I perhaps create an account to slide over to the right as I make a sizing change and keep the back button on the left, then in that case, I might want to come in here and instead of using the auto layout, say frame selection, and then just click on this guy and say, nope, I want you to be pinned to the right. I want you pinned to the left. And now when I make a change, this always is going to be in the upper left. So hopefully this is starting to make sense. If if it doesn't, go ahead and post it in chat if you have a question. But what I wanted to really clarify is that difference between those different layout modes, the grouping, the auto layout, and then also the just standard framing. So I'm going to go ahead and build something brand new, starting from scratch, just so that I can take you into more about what a library is. And essentially, I've started to create something that may be used as a library. It's kind of a mess. And typically, if you are building something that's going to be a library, you would pull all those elements that you want to save and reuse out of the file, maybe copy and paste them, get the components into another page, instead of leaving them all mixed in with a design. And so, like, to give you an example, I'll go ahead back to, I think I have one here. This is just like an extremely simple example. But if I am building a design system, all a design system is my saved fills, which are giving me my colors, my saved strokes. It's all my components. It's things that I'm going to reuse over and over again, but they're organized in a way that makes sense. And so you'll see here that I have a cover. I have a page that's called components. And on here are all the components that I'm going to use over and over again. You'll see that I created another page just called colors, and I put the company colors there. I simply took styles that were already created and put them in shapes and then put the names there so that I could find them more easily. Here's maybe UI design. And so if I look at these are all components in themselves that I can use and I can replace. And I'll go ahead and I'll show you how some of these work because it's super cool what you can do with these. And then there's just a practice page for going in and working with this stuff. This is essentially a library. And if you are working with yourself, you can use this library, but typically people who create libraries are working with the team, and they go and they share this file with the team. And in fact, one person will manage this file and make sure that it's up to date and that the colors are all correct, or if there's been changes that are made on the textiles, that's all completed within this one file, because essentially you can set it up so that it trickles down through all the other files that are used building it. So this is where I want to get. So let me go ahead and create a brand new file, just make it really clean. And I'm going to press F. I'm going to create an artboard. I'll just use iPhone 14 as my artboard. I'm going to go ahead and put a picture in. And as I mentioned, it's sometimes easier to go ahead and instead of placing an image and having to crop it and everything else, it's sometimes easier just to make the shape that you're eventually going to put your picture in. So I'm going to create a little clothing site. If I want to select this artboard, I can hold down my control or command key I can also double click on the name. I'm going to call this home. And then I've got this selected, the circle. I'm going over to fill, and I did this earlier today, but I'm going to go into fill and I'm going to choose image. Video does not work unless you have the pro version, but you can put animated GIFs in if you're just kind of winging it. But I'm going to say image. I'm going to choose an image. And this time I'll go back and I'll take this image, and that's fine. Hold it. Oops, hold it. I did not have this selected. There we go. You can put an image in your whole frame. Choose image. Here we go. Much better. And if I want to crop it, now I can choose to crop it if I want to reset where the picture is. So I've got this. This is my first page, and maybe I'm going to go ahead and create links on this. So I am going to quickly go through some of the things I've already done. Type button, and I'm going to size this, make it a little bit bigger. So I'm pressing Control Shift greater than or Command Shift greater than. And then I want to actually have a button around this. So I'm pressing Shift A. And then I am going to create a color. So I'm just going to press the letter I and sample that mint green. Maybe give it a little more padding. So I've already done all this. So hopefully this is making a little bit of sense to you. And I'll give it a rounded corner just because. And now I like this. I'm going to make it a component. And so I'm going up to the top and I'm saying, create this as a component. I want to make sure that I name it and I put it someplace correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and call it button mint. And then I'm going up to my pages and I'm saying, go ahead and create a new page called components. Now, if you're Sketch users, you know that it does this automatically. And that's a really nice feature of Sketch. Like as soon as you create a symbol or a component, it automatically creates a copy of it and it puts the original on a components page. A little more manual here, but I'm going to go ahead and move this, move to page components. All right. And then whoops, go ahead, move to page components. There we go. Go to my assets. And now anytime I want to use it, I'm going to go ahead and drag it out. And I'm going to maybe just create 3 pages here. So I'm going to select all of these, Shift A, and I'll go ahead and put pants, socks, and shoes. And if I don't want these stretching and getting bigger or smaller, of course, that's a change that I can make. I can go back and I can go back to the main component, and then I can set this so that this is actually a fixed size. You can see, again, it says it's hugging, but I can say it's a fixed width and I want it to be, let me go ahead and grab it. I want it to be this width and I want that guy to be in the center. And now when I go back to page 1, again, so it makes it just super easy to make these changes that then are reflected through all of your work. And I set this up again, looks like where I placed it, I've got a little weird padding going on. So I'm going to go back to the main component. Yeah, and I can see that I did something weird with this. There we go. It is, because it's not centered. That's why. All right, and let me go ahead and make sure that's centered on here. Okay, good. Much better. Okay, so I want to create another page. I'm just going to show you the interactive part of this. And so I'm going to go ahead and quickly create a page. I'm going to just option drag this or alt drag it, and I can press Command or Control D. Got all 3. I'm going to go ahead. If I want to change the image, I just come in, choose another image. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose socks for this one. And then on this one, I'm going to choose an image that is shoes. Done. Oops, undo. Here we go. So make sure I select the right one. And then shoes. Good. All right. And maybe I'll just go ahead and get rid of this. Wait. That's okay. We'll just do socks and get rid of this. And since it's in an auto frame, it just collapses anyway. And on this one, I'm going to get rid of pants. I'm going to get rid of shoes. You can see it just moves up. And in this one, we will replace this image with pants. Here we go. Good enough. Crop it maybe. There we go. And get rid of these two. Okay. So let's say that I actually want to build a UI where these connect. This is when you go up to prototype. And so you'll notice that I can click on prototype and I can say, hey, when somebody clicks on pants, go to the pants page. And when somebody clicks on socks, go to the socks page. And when somebody clicks on shoes, go to the shoes page. And now I haven't set anything to go home yet. Maybe I want to create a little button that is going to allow me to go home. So I'll just do a text only home. I'll go ahead and take this, create this as a little button, and I'll say when somebody clicks this, they go home. And then I'll go ahead and copy this. And since if I click on the next artboard and I paste, it will remember the XY coordinates. I'm going to call this one pants. I'm going up to the top and I am naming these artboards so it makes a little more sense. But now I click on the first one and I go up to the arrow to present this. And now, I'm done. My UI is done. I created all the buttons I like. And now I can come in and say, pants or go home, or socks or go home, shoes or go home. And just a couple of things to keep in mind. I'm in the present mode. And if I come up here to the upper right and I click on share prototype right now, and I send it to a client, they're only going to see this mode. And where this comes from is the actual frame that I selected originally. So if I go back, you'll see in prototype, it says show prototype settings. There's that iPhone 14, but I could change it to a different one if I want. And I can even change the color. Like that's the unit or the device that's showing. I can even add additional flows so that if my salesperson's going into this app and they're going to have a different flow than a customer, I can do several flows from which they can choose. But as I was saying, if I'm in this present mode, this is what they're going to see. My client's going to see. And while I'm in here, hold on, it's trying to present. It's trying to build it again. Taking some time, hang on. But while I'm in here, I can even just exit and go back to the original. In fact, I'm going to do that right now. And if I share here, I can share here and I can say they can also view this so that they can click on the objects. Be really careful. Do not give outsiders the opportunity to edit your files unless you understand that potentially, depending upon your subscription, you will be charged $12 a month for that person to have editing capabilities. So a lot of times I will just give people the opportunity to view and not actually become what's called an editor, unless you are, at work and you definitely need this person to come in and edit this. And if you're working within a team, you don't have to worry about this. This would be if you're bringing external people into your project. Okay, so let's talk about some of these things. I created one component, not a lot, but I also perhaps want to save this color. So I'll just go back to design just to create enough elements for my for my little mini library. But notice that something really cool, I don't know if you've ever noticed this in Figma, but if you select an object that has multiple colors, it will actually show you both colors so that you quickly, without selecting that independent object, go in and like say, oh, that black color I actually want to be red. I'm going to undo that, but it finds it for you, which is super cool. But I'm going to go in and say, all right, this color, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to make that a style. I'm going to call it mint. Good. Maybe this text, I want to create a style. So again, I click on the 4 dots and I'll say plus sign. This is my button text. And then maybe I'll create one more component just so that I have some objects in here. So I'll go ahead and I will place, I think I have that back button in here I can use. And I'll put a back button up here. This isn't the most beautiful design, but it'll work. I'm going to say, take this guy and make him a component. And I'm going to do the component plus. It's going to leave it there. And then I'll move the original one to the components page. Good. All right. By the way, if I go into prototype, the cool thing about the back button is you can actually go up to interactions when you have something like this selected and click on the plus sign and say, when somebody taps on this, I want them to go back. And that way you don't have to worry about where they came from. It'll automatically remember as you navigate. There we go. And so now, of course, we'll start at the beginning. We'll just check this. I might want to just close this one. It looks like it's hanging. There we go. And we'll do this. Looks like it's doing much better right now. But that is kind of start to finish. So that's my back, shoes, back. And if I come up here, I can always open an editor, which is kind of nice. And you also have some UI here that you can play with. And if you didn't notice it, down in the bottom, if you don't have the navigation working, you can even use these little arrows if you find that maybe you messed up something in the prototyping. Okay, so I have a couple components in here. I have a style. I have some, text styles. Let's pretend that we have a lot more. But I want to create this as a library. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I name this. So I just click on the canvas and I'm going to call this my project, something original. And you'll notice that it says it's in drafts. If I am working with the regular, not free account of Figma, I need to put this into a team in order to share it with everyone else on my team. And so you'll notice if I go to my home button, you'll see that, here's all my teams that have been set up and you can see all the different projects in here. But in here, mine is in drafts. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that little arrow and say, can you move to a project? Brings up all my teams. And I'll say, yeah, let's just put this in my class file. And now everyone who's on that team is going to have access to this when I publish it as a library. So I'm going to go back now to assets. And you'll see that when I click on assets, it says, okay, you want it to be a team library? Yeah, go ahead and publish this as a team library. And it says, okay, we're going to put all these items. You can put a description in if you want. You can uncheck things if you don't want it to go, but I just publish it. And now if I go ahead and I create a new project or, even open an existing one, I can go to assets and you'll see that I can go to a team library and I can just turn a switch on. So I can say, here's my project, and just turn a switch on. And now all those same buttons, colors. So if I come out here and I press F and I create a frame and I go to a fill and I go to the style, you'll see there's the mint color that I saved in that other file. If I go to the type tool and I click to put my type in and I go to the styles, did I not? No text styles. Maybe I didn't save that. But my text styles would appear there. Let me see. I'll turn on another one just so you can see like what these should look like. T style there. You can see a whole bunch of different styles here. This is my text. So the point being that once you start establishing colors that you're going to use, text you're going to use, and you start maybe saving them within a file, you can then share that with yourself or with other people. And now that one file is basically the standard that everyone sticks to. Because if I come in here and I decide I'm going to use this button, I can still go in, I can do overrides, I can change the text, I can swap the icon, I can change the color, I can do whatever I want. But there are certain things that you cannot do. And one of them is to play with the constraints in the layouts. That can only be done in the original. But, you know, as far as other things that I can do, I can totally change styles and everything. This is all stuff that's can be overridden. But yet, if I come back and I say, go back to the main component, it's going to bring this up. And if I make changes, like for instance, if I come in here and I change the rounded corner, I say, I don't want rounded corners anymore. And then I go, you can see a little dot up here. Do you want to publish that one change? Yes, I do. Publish it. When I go back to that other file, let me close this. It says component updates available. You want to review them. It's now doesn't have a rounded corner. And if I click update, it does not change anything that I overrode. It's really smart. It kept that color because I selected it, kept the font, but it knew that I did not change the rounded corners. So it said, but I will update the rounded corner, which I think is incredibly cool that you can do that. And so if you want it to go back, you'll see that over in the design panel, it lists this component because I can swap it, of course, with another one, but it also gives me the opportunity to reset all the changes and go right back to where it was. So I see a question. Unfortunately, I have to go. Oh, okay. So let me show you another really cool thing that I think is extremely helpful in understanding how this works. I'm going to go ahead and turn on a library, and I'll turn on material design. And you can get the material design file through the community. And so if I open this up, you'll see that it has a bunch of the Google icons in it. It has a bunch of layouts that you might use. You'll see styles and components, but I can set that up as a library that I can use. So I turned it on here, and you'll see that I can drag out these items, and then I can go ahead and I can change this. And I just want to show you how this is growing or shrinking. So I just want to show you this last thing before I start taking questions. I'm going to go ahead and create a text box, and I'm just going to click to create it. This is a title, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that it is set over here. All right, we're all good. We're going to keep it aligned to the left. Oh, wait, let me get rid of this. I'm going to break this style. Okay, so align to the left, but I'm also going to tell it auto height. I've been using auto width where it's been growing, and you saw it growing in the buttons. say auto height. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little better. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger. And I'm going to say, I also option drag or alt drag. This is the body text. I'll make this a little bit bigger so that it looks like a title. And then I'm going to go ahead and take this and say legal text. And then one more will be footer. And I will make this a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to select them all. And I'm going to say Shift A. And now you'll notice that if I type, it's got some bad leading on it. Let me go ahead and fix that. But as I'm typing, it is moving the other information down. So you could actually, the point that I'm trying to make with this is you could make this a component that you could reuse over and over again. And as you change the text or add text, you can add or delete it. You can even go in and it doesn't only have to be text. You'll see that in this frame, it's got text, 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 but I could have that frame selected and go in and create rectangle, a little line. So you'll see that I can even put other elements within here. There you go. And that pushes things down. And that also becomes a part of this. So this goes back to maybe building things ahead of time and creating as many objects in a container as possible and building it in a responsive way so that you don't have to do the entire project over and over again. Every time you have to create a form or create an ad or whatever it is, you can build it in an interactive way that you could use 100 times and they virtually could look totally different every time. Different image, different text, but yet still kind of stacked using a particular pattern for your containers. So let's see. I am going to leave this open because I haven't really heard from everyone and I haven't seen. Okay, anybody have any questions? Because I could go on forever, but I know that I have 4 minutes. And I'm not seeing it. Go ahead. Maybe you can tell me.
I was going to say, can you see the question asking now about if you are not working with the team?
Oh,
and have a formal library?
Okay. If you're not working with the team, you're not going to be able to publish the library. So a lot of times, if you have that paid account, you can publish a library and you can just use it yourself. You create a project and you save your library and you can use it for multiple files. If you have the free account, then what you have to do is actually have a components page and you have to have you're dealing with local components all the time. So you could have still a file that you're building that you have a bunch of components in, but you might have to take those components and copy and paste them as needed into the local file into a separate page called components. So you don't have that publishing capability. But I would suggest that you maybe get the $12 a month version. And if you're a student at Bentley, or anywhere, or can claim you're a student, you can actually get that paid version for free. So are there any potential disadvantages for creating too many subcomponents? No, I don't think there are. If you want, the only thing would be educating everyone who's going to use them. But I would suggest that if you guys want to see what a really good design system looks like, go to the community. And so I'll go to the home button and you'll see that up at the top, it says search files, teams, or people. And if I put in material design, or material, okay, here, you'll see that you can actually download these design systems from the community and investigate how they've been built. But you'll see that, some really cool stuff. I mean, I hopefully be able to get into a little bit more in the in-person version, but elements, headers, you'll see, like, big thing I would say is make sure that you organize the files, like create frames that are named and put them in, all your components and such in places where people can find them. But no, some of these systems are huge and they're very easy to navigate. And you can see, it's because of how they organize them. Yeah. Okay, good. Somebody posted design systems. That's excellent. Yeah. Best way to learn how to use them is to find them. What are you looking forward to the most? I'm not going to the config conference. So I'm getting emails to go, but I am not going. All right. Let's see. Is it possible to create a WordPress workflow? I don't know, but you know what? That would be another thing that I would go to the home and type in. There's probably plugins for WordPress, and I didn't even discuss exporting this stuff. I didn't find anything immediately, but if I go back to my file, for instance, even if you're just doing something as simple as coming in here and let me take one of my files here. Maybe I want to export some of the stuff. Here, I'll just take this, for instance. I can come in and build everything. Maybe I'm going to build it in WordPress, but I can choose all the things that I want to export. And I can say, yes, I want that to be an SVG. Maybe I want to export this whole entire thing. And this I want to export as a JPEG, or we'll say SVG for this, which makes it really easy if you build it here to go in and then just go to the file and export all your stuff here all at once. So at least you can get all your assets no matter where you're going with this immediately after. And some people even choose to use a plugin if they're going into development that is called Zeppelin. This is the one that I use. But it will even take you into another program that, let me go ahead and select a frame here. Here, I'm going to put this on here so that I have something. I'll export this. That's fine. And I'll just open this. This is just a really quick thing, but you'll see that it allows me to come in and see the files that have been exported and gives me all, like, here are all the downloadable objects, and gives me the CSS and positioning and all kinds of stuff, so that you can more easily take this into development no matter where you go. All right. For prototypes, if you have some repetitive action, like having a hover color, yes, no, oh my gosh, here, this is the coolest thing. Don't drop, guys, yet. Okay, so again, there's just so much here, but if I take this button and I want to have it hover every time, and change the color, I would make it a component and button, and then I would come up to the top and say, now I want a variant. And on this variant, I want this guy to be red. And then I simply go to the prototyping and I can say, when somebody interacts with this one on tap or on drag, I'll say, while hovering, it's going to turn to red. And then when they come back, I'll say on tap, it goes back to gray. And then I'll go ahead and I'll use this asset. I'll just go ahead and drag it in here. And now if I preview this, and so this is all just built into the variable, but you can have, there's just So you can see, now I can use that a bazillion times and it always has that hover or the reaction. But we use this for drop-down menus. We'll have a variable that will be a menu that says select state, and then we'll create a variable that lists the states. And then you click on it and it looks like a drop-down menu. So I can't get into everything, but like you can have a little motion with that, little transition, super cool. So hopefully that answers your question on that. Oh, somebody found something good. There's a beta plugin, Figma community, not sure how it works, but yeah, there's pretty much, the community is really helpful. Even if you post questions to find them, but yeah, there's a ton of stuff there as well. So guys, are we out of questions? You're all good? Okay. All right, so good. Okay, excellent, good, glad to hear it. I was glad it was helpful. Okay, and I'll see you in person next time.
Yeah. Thank you, Jennifer, for tonight. And yeah, consider that a reminder too. If anyone's interested in an in-person workshop for taking this further, you can find out more information about that at uxpaboston.org. And if people want to learn more about UXPA and sign up, we have a Slack group too. I noticed a couple postings about looking for roles. We have a few channels in there for portfolio and resume feedback, if that's something people are looking for.
Excellent. And I'm just posting, if somebody wants to reach out to me to take the full class, I'll give them a big discount. So I'm putting my email in here. So yeah, let me know.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we have a full day class and I'll get a discount code. I should have come prepared with that, but yeah. Okay, good. Are we done?
Yeah, I think we're good. Thanks
So
again.
30, sure. We got 30 people there. Sorry, guys, we're done unless you have any more questions or anything. So reach out to me. I just posted my email if you have anything specific.
Yeah.
Good.
And Jennifer, welcome back and have a good night.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
Bye.